It's time for RealAg Radio on Rural Radio Channel 147 on Sirius XM. RealAg Radio and RealAgriculture.com is your home for insight and analysis of the issues that are impacting your farm business. Let's get real and get connected with RealAg Radio.
Hello and welcome to RealAg Radio. It's time for Tuesdays with Lyndsey, with your host, Lyndsey Smith. That's me. All right. Super exciting to be in the driver's seat again here today. Great time on the show yesterday. Great lineup today. This is super exciting. So on today's show, we're going to hear how a little bit of canola meal, some protein, fed to heifers on pasture can not only improve gains for heifers, but also stretch those grazing supplies. So that's super cool. We've got Keith Currie joining the show to talk about the importance of passing Bill C-234. And well, if you're like me and you were on Friday's radio show when you're like, wasn't this a done deal? Turns out it's not. And Keith's going to explain why. So Kelvin Heppner joins for the show as for that discussion. We, of course, are going to have a little snippet from the Agronomists because I love that show and it was super fun last night, and I'm going to share the wealth and bring some of that here today. So we're going to talk about cereal leaf disease strategies and how to manage them. And then finally, Kelvin Heppner has taken pity on me, and instead of making me do the news by myself, he is going to join me to cover tons of news that happened today, starting first thing in the morning with some big merger news and continuing on all throughout the day. So stick around to the end of the show for that. If you've got any feedback, zip me an email, lsmith@realagriculture.com, or find us across social media at RealAgriculture. All right, without further ado, let's get to the show.
It's now time for a product spotlight with U.S. Borax. We're talking to Roger Gunning. So when we're talking about refined borate fertilizers, why does it matter where the borates come from?
It actually comes from Boron, California, which is a small town. It's one of the richest borate deposits on the planet. It's about the purity of the product, but for a few reasons, I think our North America farmers, we're closer. The convenience of our distributors and warehouse locations with no import restrictions. And this helps allow us to provide a better service than other borate fertilizer suppliers. Our customers, they can be confident that we're providing them with a refined borate product free from impurities that may pose a problem, for their crops.
Well, as we've been saying here on RealAg Radio for the past couple months, Granubor from US Borax. Ask for it by name and go to borax.com.
How's your seed quality? What should you treat with? What about herbicide carryover and environmental concerns? Spring is here, and you've got a lot of things to think about in regards to your pulse crop. The Pulse School on Real Agriculture has information and advice for all these questions and more to help you navigate this season. Brought to you by BASF. Pulse School episodes are available at pulseschool.com, realagriculture.com, or as a podcast on your favorite streaming service. Download the latest episode today.
Welcome back to RealAg Radio. I am your host, Lyndsey Smith, and this segment is brought to you by the Canadian Forage and Grasslands Association, who invites you to attend Partnerships, the Farmer and the Cattleman, to hear from guest speakers Rick Clark and Terry Aberhart, as well as a panel of farmers who are all alleviating fertilizer costs by including cattle and cover crops in their grain farm rotation. Join us for lunch and exploring options for improved soil health at Canada's Farm Show, June 21st and 22nd at Regina. For more information or to pre-register for your free tickets, call 306-421-8538. All right, we go now to a fascinating discussion with Mr. Sean Haney and Dwayne Summach as they talk about how adding a little canola meal can go a long way in growing out heifers.
Sean Haney here with RealAgriculture.com and RealAg Radio, Rural Radio 147. We're going to talk right now about some feeding examples on the ranch and how you need to maybe get your head wrapped around canola meal. We are joined right now by Dwayne Summach. He is a livestock and feed extension specialist with Saskatchewan Ministry of Agriculture. Dwayne, great to chat with you.
Thanks for inviting me on, Sean. Appreciate it very much.
Okay, recently you spoke at the Saskatchewan Stock Growers Annual General Meeting, talking about, it was entitled "Continuing Chronicle of Canola Meal Supplementation at Circle Y." So, talk about what the presentation was about and what some of the message was to some of the producers there.
So, the Saskatchewan Stock Growers Association undertook a ADOPT project, or Agricultural Demonstration of Practices and Technologies. And that project occurred at a couple different locations. One was the Circle Y Ranch down at Big Beaver. The other was the Cedar Lee Ranch at Hodgeville. And I reported on that last year to them. Last year was kind of the first year. And during that report, then somebody went, well, we need to do this ongoing. And so we continued it again this year. We ran into a little bit of trouble at Hodgeville. It was a little bit drier and they didn't have the grass growth. And so they didn't have the ability to continue on and do it again. So we were down to just the one location. And so that's why it's the continuing chronicles. It's what's the next year of the story. But Michael Burgess at the Circle Y has been supplementing bred heifers at the Circle Y for many years.
Okay.
And so this really just forced them to capture some data and prove to himself why he's been doing this. And so it's about feeding a little bit of canola meal. We're supplementing some protein to some cattle, to the bred heifers as they're grazing dormant native grass pasture there. And we're just feeding them a little bit. We feed it to them every other day. He delivers it mixed with salt so that the salt is used to limit intake. And so the results are actually pretty interesting. A little bit of supplementation goes a long way. And so this year, the results were, his bred heifers that didn't receive any canola meal lost about 0.8 of a pound a day. And the cattle that did receive the canola meal gained about 0.8 of a pound a day.
Oh, wow.
So you're getting to be a pretty wide discrepancy. And this is a class of cattle, your bred heifers, you want to be gaining. So it's pretty important, right? But we were feeding at 1.5 kilos every 2 days, which when you do the math, it's probably more than we needed to be feeding them. But I mean, it made quite a difference.
It's interesting here because, one, based on the intended increase to canola crush capacity in a province like Saskatchewan, we're going to have a lot more meal to deal with. Now, we can export that meal, or we can, of course, use it domestically. So there's going to be a supply out there. This is one of the ways that we could be using it. For me, I hear a lot about feeding canola meal to dairy animals. There's marketing campaigns from the Canola Council and when you go to a U.S. dairy show about that. Not as much on the beef side. Is my perception there real?
It's founded. Okay. They definitely have targeted the dairy industry, as canola meal is a high quality protein, and the dairy industry buys protein supplement. And so they've recognized that as a targeted industry, a place where it can be fed, and it does a lot of really good things in the dairy. On the beef side, we would feed a lot less, but we got a lot more animals to feed it to. And so, but price has been an issue, right? And on the dairy side, well, price is always still an issue. There's cash flow to deal with it, right? If it makes sense, it can be used. Where on the beef side, sometimes it's just, that's an expense I'm not sure I can justify, but that's part of why we do these types of demonstrations, is to help take the risk out of it and be able to actually capture some numbers. And the numbers on it this year, it was basically the way Michael had it done up. It cost him about $1,350 a ton for his supplementation. Now you can divide that by the 1.5 kilos a day, and or every other day, you can back it up to what the cost per head per day is. But it wasn't little amounts, but when you look at, can we supplement and keep them on pasture for less than we can feed them in the dry lot for, right? And that's where we're going with this.
Do you think, based on a couple years of experience here in this demonstration, do you think this is a practice that we could see a lot more of going forward in Saskatchewan and across the prairies?
I think it's going to become a tool in the toolbox to help extend the grazing season. It will not be something that we can say we're going to do this and it's going to take our bred heifers to December 15th. It's going to be one of those tools that we can use. And when it snows, if the snow gets too deep, the cattle start grazing. Now we got to move to another one. But it can get us the next 2 or 3 weeks pretty easy. Might even get us an extra 2 months. And so I can see where it's gonna, this is not new technology, right? This is something that producers in the Nebraska Sandhills, this is kind of how they winter their cows, right? Is they get them through on cottonseed milk cake or some type of protein supplement. And so really we're just taking that concept and can we stretch out our grazing season every 2 or 3 weeks we can get. Helps us, right? And so is it a strategy that we can use? Absolutely.
Now, you've been doing this for a couple of years. I'm assuming you're going to try year 3, or you'd like to maybe. For you, what unanswered questions do you have? Like, is there a curiosity that's being scratched here in terms of other things that you'd like to find out about all this?
I think we're starting to get to the place where there's canola meal. Yeah, canola meal work, but would it work even better if we did it blended with corn or barley? Do we need some energy, right? Let's just meet their protein and then give them a little bit of energy. And if we can do that with 2 or 3 pounds of total mixture a day, what does that look like? And it can go a long way.
Great stuff.
You start talking about 35 or 40 cents a supplement, but you can keep them out on the pasture instead. And yeah, you got cost associated with pasture, but it's also a lot less than it is if we put them in the dry lot. Yeah.
Extending that grazing season for sure.
Yeah.
Dwayne, thanks so much for joining us. I really appreciate it. And I look forward to hearing what more comes of this technique, because like we said, there's going to be a lot of canola meal on the countryside. So it's going to be accessible.
It's going to double up. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So Dwayne, thanks a lot for joining me.
I appreciate the invitation. It's been a pleasure.
All right. Thank you to Sean and to Dwayne for that. We are going to skip to a commercial break, and I will be back with more right after this.
Did you know that Pioneer now has a full lineup of Enlist E3 soybeans? Take a look at Pioneer brand Enlist E3 soybeans for the highest yield potential and for the best agronomic package and herbicide trait options. From the lab to the field, Pioneer brand Enlist E3 soybeans are the best in beans, period. Ask your local Pioneer representative about Enlist E3 beans.
As you head out into the field this season, the Corn School's got you covered. Everything from tillage discussions, weed control info, field trial results, yield strategies, and more. The Corn School on RealAgriculture.com has the information and advice you need to help you succeed. Brought to you by Pride Seeds and BASF. Corn School episodes are available at cornschool.com, from RealAgriculture.com, or as a podcast from your favorite streaming service. Download the latest episode today.
Infuse some energy into your next corporate event, customer meeting, or conference with RealAg Radio, Canada's national agriculture radio show. Create a unique experience at your next event with host Sean Haney, broadcasting RealAg Radio live on SiriusXM, featuring exciting guests, captivating interviews, and the latest news from the agriculture community. Contact advertising at realagriculture.com or call 587-787-1795 to book your on location with RealAg Radio today. Welcome back to Real Ag Radio. I am your host on this Tuesday, June 13th, Lyndsey Smith. Tuesdays with Lyndsey. Woo! Enjoying this very much. I hope you are too. Okay, for this segment, if you caught the show last night, The Agronomists, then this clip will sound familiar. But for those of you who maybe don't check out the live stream 8 p.m. Eastern that I happen to host, The Agronomists, last night, great show, had Kelly Turkington out of Agriculture and Agri-Food Canada, Lacombe, and Holly Dirksen from UPL, based out of Manitoba. They join me to talk about cereal leaf disease and protecting the flag. And so I've taken out a snippet from last night's show that talks exactly that, about why the flag leaf is so important, how we protect it, and then we dig into rusts and some of the other management techniques that we need to have top of mind, especially for Western Canada and parts of the U.S. right now, as this spring cereal crop approaches heading. Welcome back, everybody. I'm your host, Lyndsey Smith. I've got Kelly Turkington and Holly Dirksen here. Kelly, how important are those top two leaves, so the flag and the penultimate?
In wheat, very important. And the head tissue itself can certainly contribute to yield. In barley, it's a bit of a different story. The penultimate in many varieties tends to be somewhat smaller, and really it's the penultimate and the third leaf down from the head, the flag leaf sheath, and then the head tissue itself. So those are the key leaves in terms of grain filling and yield, and the ones that you want to directly target with fungicide, especially if you're starting to see development of the leaf spot diseases lower in the canopy. They're moving into the middle part of the canopy, and they're going to be threatening that upper part of the canopy.
So now, Holly, when we know with our fungicides, they're not curative, right? We're protecting. And so how much of a window of time do we have to protect that flag leaf as far as if conditions are ripe for disease, how early is too early and how late is too late?
Well, you want the flag leaf out because you want to be protecting. We know that even a fungicide that's systemic, it's not going to move enough in the plant. So you want your flag leaf out so that you're able to get good coverage on it for that protectant. That penultimate obviously is playing a role too. So you're going to be protecting both when you're making that pass, but it's going to depend on the season. Some years we're going to move pretty quickly through the stages, and before you know it, you're at your FHB timing. So that's a lot of the balance that the growers are trying to figure out. Am I only a week away from my fusarium head blight timing? Then, how much is going to happen in that week? Well, what is the weather forecast? Can I just wait for that fusarium timing? Because with those fusarium fungicides, you're going to get protection on your flag leaf as well.
Right. So, Kelly, for which diseases do you think it makes the most difference? Which ones move the fastest, let's say, that you maybe wouldn't want to wait?
Most of the leaf spot diseases can complete their life cycle in about 7 days. The exception is scald and barley, and that usually takes about 11 to 14 days in terms of cycling. But I would say the nice thing about cereals, and I came from more of a canola and stem rot background, is the fact that you can follow disease development in the field, and you let that tell you the stage that you need to put the fungicide on and so on. And if you're starting to see stripe rust, for instance, or leaf rust or powdery mildew earlier on during the tail end of the herbicide timing into tillering, into stem elongation, you may actually need to put a fungicide on at that point in time. And the reason why it's more effective for those particular diseases is the pathogens that cause them are all biotrophic. So they don't kill the plant tissue initially. Once you get severe symptoms, though, the plant just can't keep up with the rust pathogen. So the normal pathways in terms of the way fungicides will penetrate if they're maybe moving with the water transpiration stream, the xylem tissue, they have a better ability to actually get into where that rust pathogen or that powdery mildew pathogen is to give you potentially eradication. The leaf spots, in contrast, like tan spot, septoria, scald, net blotch, spot blotch, are all necrotrophic pathogens. So they kill the host tissue and then feed on the cell contents that are leaking out. So Once you see symptoms that are about a week to 10 days old, it's too late to get eradication in terms of tan spot or septoria or these other leaf spots. Different story with rust and powdery mildew.
Okay. That's gross. Anyway, eating the stuff that leaks out. All right, we've got goat farmer joining us from the Philippines, but originally from Saskatchewan, Alberta, and he and Jason both have a similar question. So we want to capture the flag, the penultimate, especially in wheat. They contribute the most. Does it mean we just ignore the lower leaves? Like, what about how important are the mid to low? And that would be a much earlier timing. Now, I feel like when wheat prices were through the roof, maybe that's an easier decision. But Holly, I'll start with you. Do we ignore them entirely and just target the top two?
It would have to be a very severe infection at an early timing for me to recommend going in earlier than your flag leaf timing. So in my experience, I have never seen an infection like that. The times when I see a very severe infection, and I know you're going to loop back to bacteria, but like bacterial blight in oats, that'll be like something that'll be like, this is showing up early. What do I do? How can I control? Well, a fungicide's not going to help with the bacteria. So in my experience, I have never seen a fungicide provide a yield benefit when you apply it earlier than flag leaf.
Okay. Kelly? Now, Alberta's drier, but generally speaking,
I would say, we've had a number of trials over the last 20 years, and where we see, as Holly's already alluded to, severe development of disease starting early. If we delay our fungicide application to post-head emergence, so we're thinking, well, we'll just spray once, we'll get some FHB suppression, dawn suppression, leaf spot control, or rust control, you're going to compromise your yield and grain filling. So if you're seeing significant levels of leaf spotting diseases at the tail end of that herbicide timing, moving into tillering stem elongation, you might want to think about an application around to the penultimate leaf, so even before the flag leaf stage. But I would be cautious going any earlier than that, as Holly's already said. But if you're seeing that, typically it would be wheat on wheat or barley on barley. You're probably looking at a need to put on a couple applications, one prior to head emergence and probably around penultimate leaf emergence, and then again post-head emergence.
And I think it would be stars aligning. Like like Kelly said, the rotation would be wheat on wheat, barley on barley. It would be high moisture, high humidity, and maybe a variety that's not as tolerant to the disease or resistant to the disease.
Okay. So quite a few questions earlier on and coming in about rust. So let's maybe start there. So I'm just going to put it out there. I'm no plant pathologist. We all know that. How am I supposed to tell the difference between stem rust and leaf rust from that picture? One looks more orange, Kelly. How am I supposed to know?
You've hit the key thing. So stripe rust tends to have a more of a yellowy orange color, and you'll see longer sort of stripes of that on the leaf tissue itself. Leaf rust tends to be more of a reddish brick color, and of course you can see what appear to be a bit of stripes, but normally that's not a typical sort of symptom. And in stem rust, as the name implies, you do get a lot of stem infection in addition to leaf infection. So the leaf rust and the stem rust tend to be an issue more for the central to eastern prairie regions, and of course potentially into central Canada and the Maritimes. In Alberta, stripe rust tends to be our main issue, and it reflects where the rusts are coming from. So the Pacific Northwest is our source for the central to western prairie region for stripe rust. That Texas to Nebraska corridor tends to be our source for leaf rust, potentially stem rust, but we don't necessarily see a lot of stem rust. And unfortunately, more and more over the last 10 to 15 years, we see more stripe rust development in Kansas, in Nebraska, and so on.
All right, so rust is one of the ones, of course. Rotation's not going to help it. Residue management, none of those things, because, of course, it blows in. But, Holly, do we have ones that overwinter, or do some of these sometimes overwinter, or is it just on wind?
The stripe rust has been known to overwinter, often in Alberta. Way to go, Alberta.
Yeah. Okay.
And then, in wheat, I think that's the only one. And then oat crown rust. I believe, can overwinter here, right? We have the alternate host for it here. So that would be the other one. But we're still, even with the ones that are overwintering, we're watching those rust reports from the U.S. because that is where the majority of spores are going to blow in from. Rusts are my favorite. I love this picture, Kelly. Good job.
Okay. So I don't love them, I'll be honest. Now, but I mean, Pete's got a good question here. I know here in Ontario, certainly in the oat crop, there's a lot of susceptibility to rusts here. And there's a lot of sort of oat pea forage mixture or cover crop oat that can end up just covered in this stuff. Is it the same pathogen? Like, are the stripe rust in Alberta, is that the same one that would happen in, say, Eastern Ontario? Same thing for I'm assuming there are a couple different species or strains of these things, but for the most part, are they host specific or totally like, hey, we love everybody?
They tend to be very host specific. The issue may be that particular pathotypes might be different in that sort of Texas to Nebraska corridor or the Pacific Northwest. One of the issues with the Pacific Northwest is that we have the alternate host for stem rust, and some of the recent research out of the U.S. Northwestern U.S. Pacific Northwest suggests that it is probably could be considered our center of diversity for stem rust. So I'm a little worried about that area of the U.S. potentially being a source for stem rust. But the biggest things would be the pathotype, and that would reflect the particular varieties that were being grown and the particular disease resistance packages that the breeders have incorporated into those varieties.
So are each of these as pathogenic, let's say, or and Ellen and Peter, thank you for sharing in the comments as well. So Ellen Sperry saying that she's the year that Peter's referring to in winter wheat where stripe rust, if you did not control it, was really just awful and took out the winter wheat crop. Ellen suspects that it overwintered in the trials at Kincardine that year, and because it was there shortly after green up. So I guess that's my question. Are we most worried about stripe rust, or is stripe rust the most destructive simply because it can overwinter or does show up earliest, or are some of them a much larger worry than the others? Kelly, maybe I'll start with you.
I think it depends on the particular variety and the disease resistance package. So if it's a susceptible variety and you have the rust moving in well before flag leaf emergence, and there's work out of Australia that looks at yield loss, once you get past into the grain filling period, even though you can get some significant rust development, the yield loss tends to start to decline. It doesn't disappear, certainly, but certainly as some of the commenters have said, and Peter, that if it gets established early, you can see some catastrophic yield losses. And like the comments from Ellen and others, we have seen stripe rust overwinter here in central Alberta. And 2015, I think, was a year where we had stripe rust active on winter wheat in mid-April. And so, and some of the other work my colleagues have done is that if you have spring wheat and it's a susceptible variety adjacent to these winter wheat fields that have a lot of stripe rust developing and where it's overwintered, you better be on your toes as far as scouting and then getting in there as soon as you start to see roughly the rule of thumb from Dr. Chen in Washington State. It's about 5% leaf infection. So 5% of the leaf infection or 5% of the area of the canopy affected would be sort of a threshold for stripe rust.
All right. Big thank you to Holly Dirksen and to Kelly Turkington for joining me on the show. Live is always a lot of fun. And if you want to participate in the fun, next week, I think we're going to be talking about soybean and corn emergence issues. That's Monday night, 8 p.m. Eastern. We're on YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, you name it. You can find us. And of course, you can go to realagriculture.com/agronomists at Showtime and check it out there. Okay. we're going to take a quick break and then we'll be back with a discussion with Keith Currie on Bill C-234 right after this.
Co-op AgZone Field is a digital agronomy tool designed to help optimize your operation. Through integrated layers of satellite imagery, soil maps, yield data, and more, Co-op Grow Team members use AgZone Field to provide organized, timely, in-season data allowing you to make informed management decisions quickly and effectively. Trust your co-op grow team to support your operation with AgZone Field. Contact your local co-op today.
Whether you're seeding, harvesting, or anything in between, the Wheat School on RealAgriculture.com has you covered. Timely agronomic information from industry experts available online anytime. Give your wheat crop a good start and a great finish with the Wheat School on RealAgriculture.com. Brought to you by C&M Seeds, Syngenta Canada, and the Alberta Wheat and Barley Commission.
Welcome back to RealAg Radio. I am your host, Lyndsey Smith, and this segment is brought to you by Granubor from US Borax. Ask for it by name. Well, as promised, I've got Kelvin Heppner is going to join me in the last segment for the news. But before that, I've got a clip here with Keith Currie with the Canadian Federation of Agriculture. This was recorded late last week, but really important information here, and we're going to talk about it more in the news as to what, if anything, has been updated. Spoiler alert, not a lot. But Keith really explains why Bill C-234 is in danger, actually, of getting hung up in the Senate and potentially, depending on what happens this fall, not making it into law. And that matters, and here's why.
For Real Agriculture, I'm Kelvin Heppner. Bill C-234 is the private member's bill that would remove the Government of Canada's carbon tax from propane and natural gas used for grain drying, barn heating, and other activities on farms. The bill passed the House of Commons earlier this year, got the full approval, or was approved by members of Parliament, and it's now in the Senate awaiting approval, going through the approval process from senators. And joining us for an update on where this piece of legislation is at, we're pleased to welcome Keith Currie. Keith is, of course, the president of the Canadian Federation of Agriculture. Thanks for taking the time to join us today, Keith.
Well, I appreciate the opportunity, Kelvin. Thanks for having me as well.
So C-234, there was a lot of attention paid to it when it was in the House of Commons as MPs ultimately approved it, or the majority of MPs approved it. Where is this legislation at now in the Senate?
So it did, as you mentioned, it did receive unanimous party support through the House and has gone to the Senate now. It's in the process of second reading, and really we're waiting for senators to finish speaking to it so that it can get sent off to committee for a review by committee and then back to the Senate for third reading.
So we have heard some people talk about, including Senator Rob Black, refer to a timeline of getting it through the Senate before the end of June. Is that your hope as well?
Well, that's our hope. We don't know, if it doesn't make it through the Senate before they rise for the summer break. Who knows what could happen in the fall? There could be a chance that the government prorogues. If that's the case, then all bills will fall off the table and this will be lost. So it is very important to us to get this bill through as quickly as possible.
So right now it's at second reading. I believe the critic of the bill in the Senate, there's a senator that's assigned to be the critic for each bill, and I believe that senator has yet to speak to it. Is that what's holding it up from going to the committee stage?
Yes, that's correct. We are waiting for the senator to go back to speak to it, and he was, I believe, scheduled to speak to it yesterday, Thursday, but for whatever reason did not speak to it. So now we're looking at next week, and it's a very short timeline. The other potential hiccup on this is that, since this is an agriculture-specific bill, we are hoping that it does go to the Agriculture and Forestry Committee, but there's a group of senators that are pushing for it to go elsewhere, possibly to Finance or Environment. And if that's the case, it may get buried under a pile of other bills that have to be dealt with as well. So really, we'd like to see it get referred to committee ASAP so they can be dealt with in a timely manner, and then back to the Senate for approval and finally get royal assent.
Those other bills, I guess that could include the federal budget, which is now in before the Senate as well, right?
Yes, there's a lot of bills that are there under both Finance and Environment, and yes, the budget is one of them. But certainly, we are hoping that when 234 gets its final or second reading finished, that we do get a DAG in forestry.
Keith, do you think that the senator who did not speak to it yesterday, is he intentionally stalling it, or is this is there intent behind that, or is this just something happened and it just didn't get spoken to yesterday?
I'm not 100% sure the reasoning why it didn't get spoke to yesterday. We all know that there's politics involved in everything that goes on, whether it's in the House or in the Senate, and whether there's that at play here, I'm not sure. This bill is pretty straightforward. This is something that the farm community has been asking for a long time. We did have a private member's bill the previous Parliament session that didn't make it through, but this one did, a reiteration of the former one, which also includes, as you mentioned, natural gas and propane. And because it got full party support through the House of Commons, we were hoping that it would have a fairly smooth ride through the Senate, but apparently that's not the case. And so what we'd really like to see happen is our members, our farmers right across this country from coast to coast to coast to call their senator, call them today, call them often, and ask them to expedite this process so that we do get this bill through the Senate as quickly as possible.
So is the full lobbying effort underway right now then, if you're asking farmers and members, farm group members across the country to call in and contact their senators?
Absolutely. I'm a farmer myself, 8th generation farm here. And, when you look at the fact that, the recent Stats Canada number bears out how our costs have gone up nearly 20% or over 20% year over year. And meanwhile, our net farm income's gone down 10%. So you're looking at a 30% swing in the money's coming into farm. And that's why this bill is important, because our inputs are climbing constantly, and we need this break on the carbon tax. And so we need our farmers to get out there and voice their opinion to their elected representatives in the Senate, that, and let them know how important this is to agriculture, and that we need to make this happen before it gets lost.
Is the Senate Ag Committee ready to review the bill? Could they do this quickly if it needed to happen?
Yes, I've had ongoing conversations with Senator Rob Black, who chairs that committee, and he certainly got his folks ready to go soon, if and when the bill gets to them, and he's promised to expedite this as quickly as they can possibly do it without and still give it due diligence, mind you. I mean, you can't just rubber stamp it; they would have to do their due diligence. But he's ready; he's prepared to make sure that this bill gets through as quickly as they can get it through.
Okay. So the clock is ticking, though, before the summer break, and I guess kind of running out of runway when it comes to getting this bill passed before senators go home for summer.
Yeah, absolutely. If it doesn't get done sort of early to mid next week, get referred to committee, then there's a good chance that it's not, a most likely chance that it will not happen before the summer break.
All right.
All right. Thank you to Keith Currie from the Canadian Federation of Agriculture. And, of course, to Kelvin Heppner, who will be back with the news right after this.
Peter Johnson at WheatPete, RealAgriculture.com. I'm the host of The Word, and I love doing The Word. I love the questions. I love the challenges. I love having to apply agronomics to all over the globe and areas outside of my normal jurisdiction. Also, I love the feedback the most, where growers challenge me, tell me about their plot results, help me to learn. The Word. Absolutely the best part of my day.
Canola is more than just a pretty face in the prairie landscape. It's a big business, both here and around the world, that requires you to be informed and up to date on everything it takes to grow a successful crop. The Canola School on RealAgriculture.com has an expert library of video resources covering markets, agronomy, and more to help you grow a healthy and profitable canola crop. Visit canolaschool.com today. Brought to you by BASF Canada and Invigor Hybrid Canola.
Welcome back to Real Ag Radio. I am your host on this Tuesday, Lyndsey Smith. Joining me now because, frankly, I can't really do the news without Kelvin Heppner. I'll be honest. Welcome here, Kelvin.
Thank you, Lyndsey. You definitely can do it by yourself, but yeah, we do have some stuff to talk about today, so I'm happy to join you.
Yeah, more than a little. So thank you for, so the day started with a Glencore Bunge deal. So maybe let's start there. So officially, Bunge is going to buy Viterra.
Yes, that's essentially what it is. They're calling it a merger, but essentially it is a cash and stock transaction where the new company is going to operate under the Bunge name. And this is a deal that had been reportedly that it was happening a couple of weeks ago. They finally announced it this morning, and as a result of the deal, Glencore and the shareholders in Viterra, which also include the Canadian Pension Plan Investment Board and the BC Pension Plan Investment Board, Investment Management Corp it's called, they are going to receive a combined about $8.1 billion in stock and cash for Viterra. And so this moves Viterra under the Bunge name. The company is going to be headquartered in St. Louis. And of course, both companies have a major presence here in Canada, in the Canadian market. And so it'll be interesting as we move forward to see what kind of regulatory scrutiny this deal comes under. The merger is expected to close by the middle of 2024, so in about a year. That's kind of the time frame that they're giving this deal for it to be closed.
So now we've done a bit of coverage. Of course, this is perhaps one of the worst kept secrets that this is happening, although there was no official word until now. But we did dig in a little into this, and that will the Canadian Competition Bureau actually approve this without perhaps some caveats, in that Bunge is an owner in G3. So will that create a problem, do you think?
If I had to bet, I do think that there will have to be some changes there, that the Competition Bureau will likely make Bunge divest it. So Bunge has a 25, according to the last update we have, they have a 25% stake in G3 together with the Saudi Agricultural Livestock Investment Corporation. So the Saudis own about 3/4 of G3. This is a company that was formed with the privatization of the Canadian Wheat Board. And so G3 has built elevators since, and the Wheat Board was doing it before privatization, so building some of these elevators as well, has built elevators in a lot of the same regions and markets in Western Canada where Viterra has a major presence. And so that's where I think there could be some forced divestiture have to happen there. There's also questions around the canola crushing operations in Western Canada. Here in Manitoba, for example, we have two main crushers. One is owned by Viterra, one is owned by Bunge. And so is the Competition Bureau going to let Bunge own both of those? That's a question to be answered. And Viterra has also announced a couple of years ago plans to build what was at the time deemed to be the world's largest canola crush facility of its type in Regina, Saskatchewan. And the plans for that are another question that has to be answered here. Is Bunge going to go ahead with that, or are they going to rather use Viterra's network of elevators to source canola to supply to their own canola crush facilities, which they own across Western Canada?
Mm-hmm.
That's kind of the Canadian angle. There are lots of questions in other countries as well. Of course, in the U.S., Viterra just bought Gavilon last year, so that made the acquisition more attractive to Bunge. There are also questions reportedly to be answered in Argentina and some South American markets in terms of antitrust stuff that will have to be answered too. But yeah, lots of questions that come out of this.
Right. I mean, it is an $8 billion deal, so I guess that, makes sense. But at the same time, I mean, both these companies have branches all over the place. And so to wade through in each country what's going to happen is going to be a big one. And I'm kind of surprised it might only take a year. We'll really see. Also, it makes me think we should already start some sort of game show called So You Want to Buy an Elevator, and see which ones go on the block, and maybe people will buy them.
What, you want to buy an elevator or a canola crush plant? Those
or
might be available too. Or a canola crush plant.
Yeah, get your money together, guys. That's what we're going to do. Okay.
It is interesting. So Greg Heckman, the CEO of Bunge, is going to be the CEO of the new company of what's still going to be called Bunge. But he was actually the CEO of Gavilon years ago when it sold to the company out of Asia that owned it and sold it to Bunge a few years ago. So it's kind of full circle for him in terms of some of these assets Greg Heckman is very familiar with, because he ran Gavilon years ago, and now that Gavilon business, much of it in the U.S., is back under Bunge's umbrella, under his control.
So watch where he goes next, I guess, guys. See what he ends up buying next. He's on a shopping spree. Okay, fascinating. It is kind of a small world, though, when you start to get to those, like the CEO level of some of these grain companies. Okay, lots going on, though, so let's quickly go through our ports. So in BC, we have June 24th is the earliest that port workers in BC could go on strike. They have voted in favor of a strike. That doesn't sound like good news for a grain shipment industry.
No, exactly. Yesterday, the International Longshore and Warehouse Union Canada, which represents some 7,000 cargo workers at ports in BC, so Port of Vancouver, Port of Prince Rupert, announced that they have voted over 99% in favor of going on strike. And so, yeah, these are people that handle, I believe it's an estimated 16% of Canada's total traded goods, going in the most recent data from 2020. So that wouldn't be good. And a June 24th strike, that would be before the harvest rush in terms of grain movement. But if it extends or if is delayed and happens in fall, that certainly wouldn't be good for crop values.
Mm-hmm, absolutely. Okay. Sticking with logistics, railway interswitching, for our industry and for those, especially in Western Canada in the grain trade, interswitching is not perhaps, common, but we mostly know what it is. But it's getting some attention sort of on a wider scale because, as the Calgary Herald writer writes, the tempest in a train yard, the potential of this pilot project or making interswitching permanent or expanding the distance between the interswitching points, definitely getting some play on a broader scale. And it's sort of playing out on social media and these sorts of things. What's going on? Are we really pushing for this and it's finally getting some attention? We're
seeing both sides really pushing on this one. The railways are pushing back and the shippers, including grain shippers, are pushing hard for it. And so this is something that we've covered with Greg Northey of Pulse Canada and others in the federal budget this year. The federal government announced this pilot project aimed at extended interswitching, bringing back extended interswitching, which was a temporary measure implemented following the grain backlog in Western Canada in 2013-14. Railways don't like this idea because interswitching is where they're mandated on request from a shipper to pull grain off of another railway's line. So right now the base level is 30 kilometers and they're looking to increase that into over 100 kilometers. And so this is supposed to create the effect of increased competition for shippers who are subject to having only one railway that can supply them with rail shipping service. This would introduce more competition. The railways say it would make things much more complicated and reduce efficiency in the system. And so the railways have been buying ads and campaigning, lobbying hard against this. And we've seen grain shippers, of course, in favor of this because it would introduce more competition to a market that really doesn't have any competition. In most cases, railways have a monopoly on their local grain elevator or local grain sourcing point. And so that's where, we're seeing this battle heat up, and it's interesting to see the Calgary Herald and mainstream media catching attention, paying attention to this. And the budget bill, C-47, passed through the House of Commons last week and is now before the Senate, and the Senate's trying to pass it before the summer break here. So this is where I believe things are just really heated up because railways are trying to block this from going through, trying to have an amendment made to the budget bill to remove this.
So, Kelvin, it's like you've been doing this a while because now we have a perfect segue into what else is happening in the Senate. And so earlier in the show, I did play your interview with Keith Currie with the Canadian Farmers, I can't speak Canadian. CFA. Yep. There you go. And, we do have a bit of an update, and I think, Keith does a great job at laying out, why this is a concern. And realistically, while we do have a bit of an update, the update is really that nothing, well, maybe it happens, but it probably won't. So we actually are still in wait and see mode on C-234. Yeah.
So the bill that would remove the carbon tax, the federal carbon tax from natural gas and propane used on farms for grain drying and barn heating and the like, is being held up in the Senate by the senator from Quebec who is assigned to be the critic in the Senate, and he has to speak to it before it can move to the committee stage. He was expected to speak to it last week so that it could go to committee this week. The Ag Committee in the Senate, we are told, had witnesses lined up and meetings planned already in the event that would happen. It did not, though, and so he actually has an opportunity to speak to it again today. and or Thursday. So Tuesdays and Thursdays are the days where private business can be spoken to. And so we're hearing word on the street that he has apparently agreed to speak to it. But it's, I guess everybody's kind of, after what happened last week, they're kind of saying, well, we want to actually wait and see before, like, we expected him to speak to it last week and that didn't happen. So we'll see. But there's talk now that he might speak to it on Thursday of this week, which it leaves little runway left for the Ag Committee to review it and then have this legislation reach royal assent before the summer break. And if it's kicked through the summer, then we run into scenarios in fall where there's talk about Parliament being prorogued and a throne speech and all those types of scenarios where it could be delayed even further. And so that's why there's a major push underway right now. You mentioned CFA and the Ag Carbon Alliance member groups. They're all there's been a major push over the last few days to have this senator from Quebec speak to it, but he's kind of digging in his heels, and it sounds like things are really divisive on Parliament Hill right now heading into the summer break. There's a lot of partisanship happening, and so it's unfortunate that politics sometimes often gets in the way of good policy.
Yeah, well, absolutely. And as we watch that sort of crumble, it does increase the chances of exactly that, something like a throne speech or a prorogation or something like that happening in the fall. So yeah, I guess we will see what unfolds Thursday, because that really is the deadline, for sure. Okay. One of the things we didn't talk about on the issues panel on Friday that I meant to, but is that Canada has joined with the U.S. through USMCA or CUSMA in the argument against Mexico banning GMO corn. Catch us up. There was talk that we were going to, and that, our industries were concerned, but now it looks like Canada has in fact committed to the process to formally, I suppose, what's the word? There's a formal dispute resolution.
Consultation.
Yeah. So it's a consultation. Okay. So dispute consultation under USMCA. So Canada has officially joined on.
Yes, as of Friday, they had until Friday to decide whether they wanted to join as a third party in the U.S. case, U.S. request for dispute settlement consultations with Mexico. So this is the first. So they went through technical consultations back in March to try to resolve this. That's really the first step of solving a trade concern in USMCA, in the North American Trade Agreement. This is the first escalation into actual dispute resolution. The U.S. has filed a request, and Canada had 7 days to join. They did so on Friday. And so this is being welcomed by the Canola Council of Canada, the Canada Grains Council. It's not that Canada ships a lot of corn into Mexico like the U.S. does, but Canada does ship a lot of canola that is almost all genetically modified into the Mexican market, and there's concerns about restrictions. So right now Mexico is, as you mentioned, banned genetically modified corn for certain food uses, mainly in tortillas and dough, I believe, and there's plans to phase it out in other areas. There's also plans to phase, AMLO's government also has plans to phase out the use of glyphosate in the country, and so there are concerns about the predictability and certainty of trade and market access, and when it comes to protecting a science-based approach that countries like Canada, the U.S., and Mexico have had until now. That's what this fight is all about. And so, yeah, we're going to see Canada join now as a third party in this dispute settlement consultation between the U.S. and Mexico.
All right. Well, we'll see if the dispute resolution mechanism has gone well to a point. So far, I think it was dairy that first tested. So, I said to a point, in that it doesn't seem to actually resolve things.
Not yet.
But certainly at least makes us feel like we were heard. So that's what's important, Kelvin. All right. Okay. That's all the time we have. Thank you, Kelvin, so much for joining me on the show. I can now say it's the Canadian Federation of Agriculture that Keith Currie is the president of.
Canadian Farmers Association, something like that would make sense
or
too.
Or something like that. I'm sorry to everyone. A CFA.
It's the same. It's the same meaning.
It's the same. It all means the same. But also on today's show, we did hear from Kelly Turkington, Holly Dirksen, and Dwayne Summach. So thank you to each and everyone for joining me on the show today. If I still have a job, I'll be back on Friday for the issues panel. Kelvin, I hope you'll join me for that as well. Cheers, everybody.